Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 18th edition of the BigFooty Bombercast for season 2021. I'm your host, Bonza34, and I'm joined this evening by semi-regular member of the podcast, Kyptastic. How are you?
Thanks for having me. I think we're all just a bit sad after so much promise. I think when we get the chance to reflect back on the season, I think we're going to have a lot of real positive things to say, but yeah, still pretty down after yesterday.
Yeah, well, we will certainly reflect on the season tonight as well as discussed yesterday, but we are introducing, for the first time this year, he has done one of these, but it was on a very old edition. I think maybe back in 2015. It's the man who's got the voice of Scott Lucas, and I think Kip described it as a very fine whiskey, just the smoothest voice you'll ever hear, and that is Bipolarbear. How are you?
Oh, you're trying to get me back on the podcast, aren't you, with all this flattery? I'm good, thanks, lads. I'm pretty sad about last night, but, you know, I was one of the lucky ones that actually got to go along, so I can't complain too much.
So before we do dive into it, Bipolar, I will just ask, what was the atmosphere like yesterday at the actual ground? Because on the TV, it certainly sounded like it was a very pro-Essendon crowd.
Yeah, look, I mean, even the Doggies fans that I knew that were there sort of said it felt like there was about 500 Doggy fans and about 9,500 Essendon fans. But it was a strange atmosphere because, you know, previously I went to the Hawthorn game up there, and I felt as though that was a much louder crowd. It was sort of there was a nervousness all night that you could sort of sense that wasn't there in that Hawthorn game. So, but yeah, it was an interesting atmosphere to say the least. I don't know how it came across on TV as far as like how loud everyone was, but it sort of escalated throughout the night every time there was a bad referee decision, and as we know, there are a few of those. So
yeah, so we will jump straight in, and before we talk about how we actually played, let's discuss the elephant in the room, Kip, and I'll start with you, mate, because I know you're chomping at the bit to have a crack here. Umpiring yesterday, I think Waitman's. I think one of his free kicks was there. I think the other three he'd be generous in saying were iffy.
Look, I made the point of rewatching the highlights of his goals on AFL website before coming on here. I wanted to make sure. It was very difficult. I think, you know, I'm owed a lot of money for doing that, but I wanted to make sure that I had a recent thought about it and make sure I wasn't just reacting to the red mist of the game. And if you want to go through, I'm going to go through them, because the first one, he did the old Joel Selwood, lifted the arm high tackle, gets a goal. Second one, he runs into Draper's arm. He ran into Draper's arm. Draper didn't swing and hit him, gets a free kick. Third one, the Gleeson one, you know what? That is probably a free kick, if you don't count the fact that happens all sorts of contests everywhere in the forward line at both ends, and it wasn't paid for down at our end. And the fourth one, the reaction of Zach Merritt said it all. No idea what that was for. It was in play. The bump was in play. You know, there's nothing untoward to it. And I think, you know, the automatic reaction is to be really annoyed at Waitman for, you know, particularly for the first one, just the action, but just the complete inconsistency of the umpiring just drives me nuts. There were so many times when we would drive the ball forward and you'd see Peter Wright and Alex Keith is ripping his arm off him as he's trying to go for the ball, and there's nothing. And it's just that blatant inconsistency that drives you nuts, especially at moments where it changes the momentum of the game.
Yeah, no. So I will just raise a couple of points with you before we switch to you, Bipolar. But that third one against Gleeson, I think the problem was, and I know you're right with the inconsistency, but the big difference between that and a right is Cody went to ground. He felt the contact and literally just fell backwards because he went, oh, well, I don't need to stand up here. If I fall back, the umpire's going to ping him. And that to me is just disgraceful football, because a forward should be trying to stand up and using their strength to take the mark, but he felt the slightest touch and went down. And to me, that was just horrendous. The one against Merritt, I don't think it was paid against Merritt, which makes it even worse, because Gleeson does have two hands outstretched pushing him, but he barely touches him. I mean, as you said, Merritt's the one that made the contact and pushed it and hit him in the side. But I think the umpire seen the two hands from Gleeson and somehow thought that's what's put him to ground, which I don't know how you see that and think that the laws of physics dictate that can't have possibly happened. And Luke Hodge on the boundary, I mean, you know, Luke Hodge, none of us are his biggest fans. He's a Hawthorn captain, and, you know, we all despised him when he played. But still, you have to admit that he knows what he's talking about, and he's one of the most respected commentators going around at the moment. He was bewildered. And he even said that on the telecast that he said to Merritt, mate, I don't know what that was for. No idea. Like, it's unbelievable. And at such crucial times as well.
I think, when the commentators are starting to talk about it and bringing it up, and they can't, come out and say it's, blatant incorrect umpiring or, that Waitman's, a cheat, that it's an issue that they're aware of. And if they're making those sort of comments, then, there's some sort of issue. And I think the thing with Waitman, he's obviously got a lot of talent. I think we'd love him if he was playing for our side, but you do get a reputation as a player for that sort of stuff. And then you start to lose the fair free kicks. You look at what happened with Lindsay Thomas, so he would play up for free kicks, and then because of that reputation, he wouldn't get the ones that he would deserve. And you see it. You also see it with Toby Green, although he's got bigger problems this weekend. You see players like that, when they get that reputation, they're going to start losing the ability to get the free kicks they actually deserve. So he may be doing himself a disservice in the long term by acting that way.
Yeah, and I would just like to jump in there just before we switch to you, Bipolar. I know you're keen to say your bit too, mate, but when people say we love him on our team, we love him for his ability, but I still have memories of when Joe Danaher was at the club and was throwing himself forward, looking for free kicks, that we were infuriated that he just would not stand up, because Danaher was starting to get to a stage where he was literally missing easy marks because he was just hunting for that free kick, and it drove us insane. So I get that we'd love him, but I still would like to think that maybe as a supporter base, based on what happened with Danaher, we'd also be incredibly frustrated by Waitman's playing, which the Dogs fans just, for some unknown reason, refuse to acknowledge. That they're all adamant that those free kicks were there, and nobody who's ever watched the game in the past, 120 years that it's been that the league's existed could ever think that all 4 of those free kicks were there and deserved yesterday.
Yeah, look, I think that sort of stuff, it's a blight on the game. I hate it in every sport. Like, it drove me away from watching soccer. And I think I like what you said before about Lindsay Thomas and Joe Danaher, just because, they were the prime examples of times where games are just frustrating to watch as a supporter, like neutral or not, And I think that, look, the one that really disappointed me yesterday was the Merritt one. I was on the absolute opposite side of the ground, and I think that was the 4th one that happened.
Yep.
From memory. I haven't actually watched the replay since for some unknown reason. But that one was particularly bad because the thing that I noticed was it knocked the wind out of the crowd. That was where everyone just sort of went, this is, that's 4 goals in a row that they've gotten from, not in a row, but from a free kick. And in these conditions, 4 goals that it's sort of given to you, you can't come back from it. And so the crowd sort of went from being elevated to deflated. So that was the sad thing for me. And the one that I was right above was the Draper one. And that one there, from the sort of angle that we saw it just didn't look like anything happened at all. He just sort of flicked him on the cheek or something like that. And yeah, over he went, felt the contact, and off he went. So I really just hope that they crack down. I remember yonks ago with Leroy Jetta. I think he did a really bad dive, and they cracked down on it. They were like, nah, free kick. And for a little while there, I feel like that sort of set the standard, but it's sort of been forgotten since then. Dives are creeping back into the game.
Well, Leroy Jetta's still the only person who seeks suspended for staging. It's all just fines now. And I think
he didn't get suspended. He only got a fine.
You sure? I'm sure he got suspended.
No. There's this. We can look it up. We'll look it up, but I'm positive he only got a fine, because there was a bit of talk on our board not long ago that Leroy Jetta was the only person to get fined, and then when that was not being proven true, it then became he's the only person to get suspended. And I still don't think that's true.
I thought it was a free kick. I actually thought they said free kick staging. I don't know. I could.
Here we go.
That might have been it.
No. So he was charged with staging, and he also had another offence in the same game that he got suspended for. That's it. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just looking it up.
Right.
There we go.
Yeah. But anyway, look, to be honest, lads, we'll move on from the umpiring because we could talk about this for all night. I mean, there's plenty of decisions.
There's positive things to talk about. With
and I think
we've had a ripper.
We've had a ripper season. I think at the end of the day, we're all in agreement that it was just horrendous decision making at a time that when the game was on the line, it just killed us. And you know, at the end of the day, the Bulldogs ran away in that last quarter, and that was disappointing in itself.
Well, I think on that, just before we do move off the game, I think obviously there is an issue for us. We saw obviously with the Brisbane game, we got blown off the park. It's happened again here. But when the game was dry, we really did have the opportunity to really put our stamp on the game. But with, you know, a few fumbles and a few misses of goals that should have been kicks. And Francis had a couple of snaps that probably should have been kicks. Snelling had a snap. Shiel in the goal square dropped a very easy mark. We should have been, you know, 3 or 4 goals up at halftime with, you know, competent skills and competent umpiring. And that changes the game. So even if the Waitman stuff does happen in the third quarter, you know, they're only getting to parity. And that changes the mentality of the players. I mean, you could see at the end of the in the fourth quarter, once that stringer goal, once Durham got in the way of that stringer goal, the momentum just went out of the players, and you know, the Bulldogs got a few cheapies, and I don't think 49 points is anywhere near a reflection of where the teams are at. We really took it up to them in that first half before it got wet, and we just unfortunately don't have the skills or the nous or the bodies to really compete against a side like the Dogs in the wet. So, which makes them deserved winners. But yeah, a few issues, particularly the skills. And I think, Shiel was probably the epitome of that in that first quarter.
Yeah, for sure. That one that he sort of toe poked, and you could see that he was just trying to get it round the corner, and it sort of just skipped over the line, and they called it intentional. My God, that was an insanely frustrating one. But look, I think there are a lot of positives from the game last night as well. Like Merritt, oh my Lord, he was like, I couldn't believe how hard he was running. Like, and it wasn't, usually he sort of, you know, he's a bit of he sort of jogs a lot and then, you know, sprints occasionally. But in this game, like on the ground watching it, he'd just be like sprinting the entire game. It was insane. He was just on fire. I think he got 9 or 10 tackles, and he was the one guy that I thought, man, this guy really, really wants to win. And Parrish was obviously on fire in the first half as well. So 16 possessions in the second quarter, I think. So.
I've never seen Merritt as angry as I have in that last, but he wanted to hurt someone. Like he was serious. He was seriously angry. He was really getting stuck into them. Obviously the game was gone by then, but no, you know, Merritt and as you said, Parrish, Draper had a really strong effort. That ruck dominance could have been useful in the dry. Obviously in the wet, his influence reduced. I thought Ridley played really well. I know Norton kicked a couple of cheapies at the end, but you know, Norton's meant to be one of the best contested marks in the game, and Ridley matches him quite comfortably. He's beating him one-on-one.
And that's the only string. It's the only thing that Norton has in his game as well. Like it's the only thing he has. So the moment you take that out, that's it really. And Ridley does that so well.
Yeah, exactly. I think look, there are a lot of positives to take. One thing I will say though is for me, it did feel a little bit like we went in too top heavy. I mean, it was always going to rain, and I think that maybe we just went in a little bit too top heavy, and maybe we did. And I'm not sure if it's a lesson to be learned, but I mean, Stewart and Ridley, it's not a massive back line, but once Hind went down, we didn't really replace him as such down there. Yeah. We brought Gleeson in, but he's another one of those medium sort of blokes that plays a little bit taller. We sort of lost that run. You know, we didn't bring Tip and Woody in for whatever reason, and I'm not sure what that is, which, you know, again, so we didn't have that run. It just seemed we went in with a lot slower side than we have at all this year. We had other options we could have brought in, maybe to bring up a bit of pace. And then once the weather hit and the ball hit the deck, well, we were caught lacking. So I think we might have missed a trick at the selection table this time round.
Well, it is interesting because the Dogs did bring in Gardner for Johannesson, obviously for Cordy, but they also played Shaki. They went tall as well. Like, it wasn't like necessarily that we were over tall. I don't think that the height necessarily made that much of a difference. I think it was just that body size. You know, McRae, Lidler, Bonts, Bailey Smith. You know, for a young guy, he's tough as nails. I just think they had too many strong bodies for us in the contest, particularly when it's wet and we can't get our handball game going. I think that was probably the biggest difference from that third quarter onwards.
Another thing is, I don't feel like we adapted our game plan that much from the first quarter when it was drier. It seemed like we were trying to do the same thing, over handballing it, you know, trying to get that kick into space. But obviously in the wet, you know, it's easier to sort of close the distance, I think. And also, like, you could see that the Doggies tried to play a real one-on-one sort of style in the second half, and it's just like we didn't do anything to adapt to it. So it was I think tactically we sort of, you know, need to do a bit bit more work in the wet. So
yeah. Ideally, I probably would have liked to have seen Francis go behind the ball if we were going to do something like. I mean, bringing Gleeson in, I really think Francis could have played the Gleeson role. If that was the idea, to have Gleeson replace Hind, then I really think we could have just brought Francis in and probably released Ridley a little bit more, and maybe gone a little bit of a smaller forward line. But I mean, end of the day, I think that's possibly one of the only selection mistakes that I think we've made this year. So considering that many of us predicted to be, bottom 6, if not bottom 4, to still play a final was a sensational effort and something that the group should be proud of. And I'd just like to give another shout out to a bloke who I still can't believe missed All Australian. I think I've seen a few arguments that I don't hate as to why he missed. I know the Grizz was definitely a very strongly opinion that he was robbed, and I was with him. And then I read a few arguments. I probably mellowed a little bit, but I still think he should have made. And that's Stringer. I mean, he only had 9 kicks, but he still kicked 2 goals, 1, and he laid 8 tackles. I mean, he was still a presence yesterday. His game's just gone to a different level. If Jake Stringer 6 months ago had 9 touches, he'd have lucky to have influenced the contest, in my opinion, because he just when he wasn't getting that 16, 17 touches, he wasn't kicking goals. But now he's that much more damaging per possession. It's just ridiculous.
Well, I don't think he laid 8 tackles at the Dogs. Like the whole time he was there, he wasn't that sort of player. And now you sort of know you're going to get your 4 tackles from him, and he's going to go hard every contest, and you can see how much his cardio's improved as well. Like it's out of sight, comparatively. He's sort of almost like that Dane Swan sort of player now compared to what he used to be. So, he's had a huge season. I completely agree. He was a bit unlucky, I think. I think he had a bigger season than Papley. I know people sort of say, well, Papley's a small forward, Stringer's a medium forward, but I sort of think that, when you've had, was it 38 goals from 18 games compared to 41 goals from all the games. And I think Stringer had so many more assists as well. I just think that, he had a bigger season. They just couldn't include the 3 Dons because we're not sort of premiership contenders.
Well, I always thought we were going to get 2 of the 3, but my assumption was it was going to be Stringer and one of Merritt or Parrish, depending on which way they went. I think no one has played that sort of role, the goal-kicking midfielder, as well as he has. And goal-kicking midfielders are, fairy dust. Okay, they very rarely exist. Like look at the best midfielders in the game. They're not kicking as many goals as Jake. And yes, he didn't play full-time midfield for the first half of the year, but what he produced in that second half of the year is the best football anyone was playing. He should have been in that. He should have been in that side. And it's really good to hear, like just the way he speaks, the fact that he's getting really clear messaging from the club about what their expectations of him are. He came back, like, this is not the first time he's come back or he's been in this shape. He came back at the start of last year in really good nick. Probably not quite as good, but you could see that the penny had dropped and then he got injured, and then the hub life, being away from his family, and I think he just had a kid. You can understand why, he didn't have as strong a second half of the last year. We know that we know a lot of players struggle with it, so, look out competition. Like if he gets a second half of the year, all year next year, he's going to win the Brownlow. You put your house on it.
So lads, we will move away from yesterday's game because it was disappointing, and I think the main talking point is the umpiring, which, as I said before, we could do it to death how infuriating it was for all of us. And I think maybe now we'll start looking back on the season and probably just look at the individual players as we go, and we'll see how many we get through, and we'll try and get through as many as we can. And we'll kick off with McGrath. Now, McGrath, I'm surprised he played 15 games. That seems more than I certainly remember him playing. Look, I love Andy. I don't know about you, Kip, but I love Andy, and I think he's going to be a midfielder. I know that a lot of people now are saying maybe his best position is in the back line, and he does panic and do those dump kicks, which is incredibly infuriating at times. But his ability to generate space in such close confines, to me, is something that you can't waste in the back line. I mean, how did you see his season, Kip?
I feel like he had a bit of a steady year. It was sort of leveling off. I think the last couple of years he's been building into that midfield role, taking on more and more responsibility. And I think it's with the rise of Parrish and obviously Merritt playing really well, there probably wasn't the space for Andy to really, really flourish at the start of the year. He was always playing his role. He's always trying really hard. He does really well as that, that third mid, playing a bit of that defensive blocking role, sacrificing a bit of his game so others can do well. And I think, if we have, a Merritt and a Parrish and a Stringer performing the way they are, we don't need McGrath to be, the superstar midfielder that he probably is capable of. He probably can sacrifice his role for the team to allow players like Parrish and Merritt and Stringer to really, really shine. You can't have, you can't have 6 Ferraris running out of the midfield. You have to have a few, Datsun 120Ys to really, do some solid grunt work.
He's a 180B. Let's be honest. Come on.
Fair enough. He I think he has the capability to be a superstar, but I don't think the club needs him to be a superstar at the moment. I think the club needs him to be a support player for the superstars, and I think he's one of those players whose first idea is to do things for the team, and I think he will do that. But if heaven forbid that we have a situation where a Parrish or a Merritt go down, I think he's more than capable of stepping into those roles if he's given the opportunity.
Yeah, look, I think I'm one of the ones that sort of goes on about that we should have him in the back line. Now, my thoughts on that are purely were mostly about this year, because at the start of the year he was having he was really good. Like, he had a couple of 30 possession games. You could tell that he was a midfielder and that it was clicking. However, sort of when he came back from his injury, I got the sense that his cardio sort of wasn't at that same level, and he is an incredible shutdown small defender. I really feel as though if we had him on Waitman yesterday, and that was what I was hoping we were doing with the news of Hine coming out, I seriously don't think he would have had that sort of impact on the game. I don't think he would have gotten near the ball. Like, he's that good of a shutdown defender. Next year, I want him as a midfielder, obviously. But, if he's ever injured again, throw him in the back line while he sort of recovers his cardio. That's my thoughts anyway.
I actually agree with you, Bipolar Bear, that I think McGrath could be an elite lockdown defender. I just don't think we need him there, and I think it's a waste of his talents. But, mate, well, the next bloke we'll talk about is obviously our big Sammy Draper. Now, I loved how he played this year. I thought he grew into his role. I thought he's one of his better games, and one of his most underrated games was probably his game against Grundy towards the last round. I thought he broke even with Grundy. And look, I know Collingwood had nothing to play for, but Grundy's still a superstar. And to me, that was a massive game. And he's obviously dominated contests and been more prolific, I suppose, in other games. But how did you see him this year?
That's probably, we have to remember he's 20 games in. He's still learning a lot. His kicking reminds me of me as a thirds player. He's got a bit more distance, but there's still sort of the...
He drops the ball from his eyebrows. We can all say that.
Yes, that's what I used to do. I think he's obviously learning, but he's just so exciting, and he's obviously already got a connection with the mids. And I think you brought up with the Grundy thing. The thing that he hasn't been able to do at this stage is go with the elite ruckman. The fact that he was able to go with Grundy suggests that another year to a development, no one's going to be able to stop him.
Obviously, the next bloke we're going to discuss now is the number 3, Darcy Parish, and I won't say much because there's a lot that has been said about him on this podcast already. He just went to another level this year. He got all Australian honours. It was a level that I'd hoped he had, but I certainly didn't expect him to get to this year. And it was just crazy how good he got once he got the opportunity to be a full-time mid and not 70% mid, 30% half forward or whatever the ratio was.
Adversity creates opportunity, huh? Look, I think on the forums, a lot of us have been calling for this for a long time. I think, just in general, Essendon supporters have been saying, what the hell, worse for foul, throw him in there, like, just see what he can do. And pretty much as soon as he did it, as soon as he got the opportunity, he just came out and started dominating. Anytime there was a game where there was a medal on the line, he wanted to get that medal. So, and he was just as good yesterday. Like, I don't know how many possessions. I assume it was about 35. But you can tell he's got that big game player part to him that we've needed for so long. That come with me, grab me by the scruff of the neck, and off we go sort of player. Which I'm really happy is that sort of guy.
Yeah, and so Kip, the next one is Kyle Langford. So 17 games, he averaged 20 touches and almost a goal a game. I think we missed him yesterday. I think he would have been one of those big bodies that would have been helpful. Yeah,
he's really growing into his football. The gap between his best and his worst is really close. He's not leaving the ball on the boundary and running off to let the opposition running off the field to the interchange bench to let the opposition get it anymore. He's really clean. We can throw him anywhere. Like he'll be great on the wing. You can throw him into the midfield, centre bounces, or you can play him forward. That versatility is really important. And yeah, he's just someone you trust to do the right thing. Like he's one of the best set shots for goal, and some of his delivery inside forward 50 is really good. I agree. I think we did miss him.
Dev Smith played 20 games this year. He's certainly been a frustrating one for mine at times. His undisciplined acts drive me insane, but he still does play that odd game or two where you go, geez, he's a good player when he knuckles down.
Oh, yeah. Like you say, he's an insanely frustrating player. But that game he played against Collingwood, you sort of go, oh, hold on a minute. Has he still got something? Can he be that sort of a player once every 2 to 3 games? If he can sort of close that chasm between his worst and best games, and just chill out with the discipline stuff. I genuinely think he's still got a role to play in the team. But yeah, I think that he just needs to sort of work on that sort of work on his head. Really, that's the main thing.
Jai Caldwell this year didn't get many opportunities. He obviously played yesterday, and I thought for the first quarter he was really, really good, but then fell away because lack of conditioning. But there's plenty to work with, I think, for the future based on the few glimpses we did see this year.
Yeah, look, obviously the question is his hamstrings. The history of hamstrings. Hopefully, they can get onto specialists. Look at maybe his running patterns, or potentially some different work, different strengthening exercises to prevent that. Because if he gets a clear run at it, he's going to be a very valuable addition, and we suddenly are going to bat really deep in our midfield.
So the next one we talk about obviously is Zach Merritt. I mean, again, same as Parrish. There's not much more we can say that hasn't been said on this podcast already. He was huge this year. If he could maybe become a bit more of a goal-kicking mid, that would be ideal. But his ball use and everything was just sensational all year, and he's probably the captain in waiting. I mean, is there much more we can say to sing this bloke's praises?
I think he's just as complete as they come. I think, whenever I sit there and think of the best kicks in the competition, him and Daniel Rich are the ones that come up, straight away for my mind. He's just got, he can kick those lasers that hit people in the chest from, 35 meters out. He's got those amazingly weighted kicks. He's got the ones where he sort of, kicks a banana to a bloke that's 15 meters away, but he's going to kick over 3 guys. He can do anything with his foot. It's incredible. It really sets the play up for our team.
I think when Darcy was having, Darcy was exploding and everyone was looking at him. If you were watching Merritt, he was having just as good a year. I just think because we have such a higher expectation of what Zach can produce, we weren't as quick to realise. But his year, I mean, that's probably a career year for him as well. And I think the fact that he committed to the club so early gives us a lot of confidence that someone of his quality thinks that we're going places. And I think that's a really good sign for the future.
So we move from Merritt to Marty, and I don't have a great deal to say. He played 6 games. He's a depth player. I think when he came in, he was solid enough. I don't think he's a standout. Unfortunately, I think the ankle injury a few years ago probably robbed him of what was going to be a pretty good career. I think we all sort of thought he'd become the player that Ridley has become, but there's not much more you could say about depth players. So we'll jump straight across to Dylan Shiel, who again suffered injuries this year, only played 8 games, has been hammered pretty harshly on the board based on yesterday. I think Doss said it the best, though. You can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. He had a poor game yesterday, but he's still trying to find his feet, and he's not used to being third banana. And let's be honest, he's third banana now, so he's going to have to find his way in that role, and I don't think he's quite found it just yet.
He's probably had, the start of last year, he was one of the best players in the game. He was Brownlow form, and then he had that suspension for the bump, and he wasn't the same since then. And then obviously he came back. Thought he started okay in the Hawthorn game, kicked a couple of goals, and I thought he actually was having a bit of a role change moving forward already, even before the Parrish explosion. And then the injuries just obviously cost him. He hasn't come back with any fluency or anything. And I think, I think people are forgetting what he can do, because it's probably been a couple of years now since he's done it. But I think if he gets a good run at it and he can work on his place in the side, as he says, as the third banana, we shouldn't be quick to say, let's just dump him and get a draft pick and move on. I think, you've got to, as you can see with the Melbournes and the Bulldogs, you've got to have great midfield depth, and we can't throw Shiel away and expect to get anything near his value or anywhere near as good a player to fill the role that he can fulfill.
He sort of does something that, only really Stringer can do in the team, and that is sort of break tackles and just sort of, run through the lines. And I think that's a really important thing. I mean, his kicking is his kicking. It's always going to be sort of average or below average. But, I think the things that you get from him are the, that extraction and the explosion, really. So I don't know. I rate him as a player, and I think he definitely belongs in our midfield, despite some of the comments that I've read about him lately.
Yeah, and I think, Kip, when you're talking about the trade value, his trade value is nowhere near what he's worth to the club. And some people are saying, we've got midfield depth now. And then they listed him in their midfield depth. I mean, if you're going to say we don't need the bloke who's got midfield depth, don't list the bloke in the midfield depth. That's my only advice. But Aaron Francis is the next one, and he played 15 games. Look, I don't know about you boys. I think Francis forward is a failure. I think it's just a complete waste of time. I might be being a little bit harsh here, and I'm not sure if there is a spot for him in the back line if Laverde, Stewart and Ridley are down there. But I'd like to see Francis probably playing on the tall and have a little bit more loose because, I mean, at the end of the day, he only kicked 2 goals for the year. It's not a great return, and he did play a few games there.
I might be doing my future ability to be invited back to any podcast no favours here, but I completely disagree with you. I definitely see a future for him as a forward. You see the way that he attacks the ball. In some of the games, obviously he didn't have huge impacts, but you can see the way he attacks the ball, the way he leads up and is an option up on the wings, and with his delivery in a forward 50, with his kick when he's coming off, I think we definitely have a weapon there, and I think you can accommodate him in the hooker role that we had with both Wright and Jones. I definitely wouldn't be calling it a failure just yet. I definitely think there's something to work with there.
It kind of reminds me of that period of time with Francis at the moment where, do you remember with Hurley, the way we had him up forward for a little while and he sort of won that game against Hawthorn for us off his boot? He's at that stage where he could go one way or the other, forward or back. And, and he has that sort of Hurley level aggression as well. I don't know. I'm really 50-50 on it. I sort of do see the potential as a forward. And I see it as a backman as well, but he's just got it's the way he reads the flight, in the back line, I think is rare. I think that's sort of where he belongs based on that. And, I think once again, if he gets a really clean run at it, I think you'll see a Laverde-like season from him.
So we'll move from a bloke that we're a little bit in a disagreement about to a bloke I think we're all going to be in consensus here in Zaharakis. He's been a good servant. I don't see a spot for him moving forward, and I'll be surprised if he gets offered a contract. I don't think it's been announced he's retired, but I think it was the Age had reported that he wasn't getting a farewell game, which may have been news to him that he wasn't actually going around again. I'm not sure, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him hang up the boots.
Great servant, much maligned. I think he's definitely been better than a lot of people suggested. But yeah, I think it's just his time. There's other options. When he's been fit, it's not like he's been injured and not playing because of that. He's been fit enough to play, but hasn't been selected. I think that's when you get to his age, that's a pretty good sign that it might be time up.
He's also, he's also part of one of the biggest moments in Essendon's history with that goal on the wet on Anzac Day. So, I mean, that alone is, and the fact that he's played 200 games, I think is, he's a great servant of the club.
So from a bloke that we all in agreement will probably not go around again to a bloke that I think many people thought would be D-list fodder at the end of this year, and that's Tom Cutler. And I think he was exceptional in the back half of the year with his role, and it's amazing. But I mean, I think if Francis goes back, I don't think there's room for Cutler. I think he gets moved out. But if Francis is going to stay forward, then I reckon Cutler's important moving forward. And he did his job very, very well this year and would have been stiff to have been dropped for the final.
I think he'll go around again for sure. I think the great thing about him is you can play him wing, you can play him half forward flank, and you can play him in the back pocket. Like, you need that sort of depth if you're going to win a premiership.
Well, I think just on that, I mean, I think halfback seems to be his position. We've tried him on the wing with no success. I think having halfback, you've probably got a bit more a clearer role as opposed to the wing. I think wing, you've got to be very agile in thought and knowing where and when to go. Whereas the halfback, it's straight lines, it's in front of you. I think that really plays to his strengths. And yeah, look, I had him on, like when I was doing my list management selections earlier in the year. He was a definite gone, but now he's a definite keep. Just a question of whether it's 1 year or 2 years.
So Nick Cox is a player that I think we're all very excited to see in future. I don't see any world in which he doesn't become a superstar, or at the very least becomes an enigma that the club supporter base gets behind. He was good at times this year. He did find his way out of the side towards the end of the year for various reasons. I think, unfortunately for him, it was just the week that they decided to give him a rest that we actually sort of picked up our form again. So then couldn't force his way back in because he spent most of the time sitting as the sub. Probably should have got time, I think, yesterday, even if it was just a cheap 10 minutes in the last quarter, just give him a taste of finals footy, but still very exciting prospect.
Oh, look, the sky's the limit. The only thing will be is that hopefully they don't stuff him around with his position too much. Give him a year or two in a position, whether that's the wing, whether that's half forward, in the back line. Give him a chance to settle and work on his game. And I don't think it's any surprise that he wasn't performing towards the end of the season. He's come off a year of no football, and he's an 18, 19-year-old kid. I think we've got more than we could have asked for from Nick Cox this year. And I'm just so excited to see where it goes from here.
Let's just not do the Essendon thing and just make sure we keep him in a position. Don't, sort of jumble him around for 55 games. Just, put him where you think he's going to be good and just keep him there and let him learn.
So, lads, we've done about a quarter of the list. There is a lot more to get through, but we'll save it for future podcasts because, we don't want this one to run too long. Now, we are going to take a break, just as a heads up. We are going to take a couple of weeks break from podcasts. We're going to hit one up for the trade period where we'll go through some more players in a season review then. But before we go, lads, I think it's easy to say, and you can tell me if you're wrong, but I think consensus amongst the fan base, and it's probably going to be amongst us three, is the top three in the best and fairest will be Stringer, Parrish, and Merritt. Mm-hmm. Either of you disagree with that?
No, I think that's pretty clear cut. Maybe Ridley, maybe.
Well, so my next point. So I think Ridley will probably finish fourth.
Laverde?
I actually think Laverde's a shot.
My next question was going to be
top three.
Yeah. My question was going to be who comes fifth and sixth, because I sort of have the top three and then Ridley as the clear next option. So who then comes fifth and sixth? Now Laverde's one. Is James Stewart a chance?
Well, see, the way our best and fairest works, you benefit if you play more games because everyone gets votes every game depending on how the coaches rate you. So even because Stringer missed 3 or 4 games, he might not even be necessarily top 3 or 4 just from that reason. Like, he's going to get high votes in a lot of his games, but he might miss enough games that he actually isn't top 3. Now to actually think about it. And then players like a Laverde or a Ridley who maybe didn't perform at quite the heights of Stringer, but performed year on, didn't miss a game. And I think obviously we didn't get to Laverde, but how amazing is it that he played every game of the season when he'd get injured, turning a corner. But yeah, I think so maybe Stringer might not be a top 3 in that sense. And we're looking at like a Ridley or Laverde who did play all the games to be in that top 3 or 4.
Nick Hind, I think, is top 5. He's someone that I sort of didn't really think of, but I just think he is, like, for 3/4 of the season, I thought he was going to be All-Australian. I think he's had a huge year. I genuinely believe he'll be top 5. Possibly over Ridley.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I certainly hope that his Coles $8 chook was worth missing the game yesterday. Look, and just on Nick Hind, I know there was a lot of angst and a lot of anger, and I do understand the frustration that AFL play, and I know for a fact that the AFL told clubs to tell their players, get everything delivered, and if you can't get it delivered by conventional means, then the club has to organise somebody to deliver it for you. Basically, it was drilled into them, and unfortunately for Nick, he's not the only one that's done it. There's definitely been other instances this year where players have obviously gone to the supermarket, but unfortunately, he was the one that got caught out, and I don't think he cost us the game or anything silly like that. I read that a bit on social media, a few blokes suggesting, not on our board, just in other social media areas, that maybe Hind would have made the difference. That's a bit laughable. I mean, it would have been helpful, but he certainly didn't cost us anything. And all I think it'll do is just drive him next year.
So what you're saying is stop blaming Tasmanians for that whole thing, right? Seeing as everyone said it was to do with our border security.
At the end of the day, well, I mean, at the end of the day, the health of the state takes precedence over football, and if that's what Tasmania is doing to keep themselves safe, and at full credit to Tassie, they've managed to more or less keep the virus out, then you can't really complain about it, can you? And
no, that's right. And with our shallow gene pool down here, we can't let this virus in. Let's be honest.
and we went to Tassie because we didn't want to do the South Australian quarantine. But anyway, lads, we'll call it an evening there. I'd like to thank you both for coming on, Kip, once again, and also to you, Bipolar, the sexiest man on the board. It's been great listening to your voice this evening.
Pleasure. You'll have it again soon, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure Beery's appreciate the smooth tones as to opposed to the normal rabble he gets, which is a shot at everybody else who does the podcast.
Thanks, lad.
Cheers. Thanks, sponsor.
Thanks, guys.